Okay, so uncovering the purpose of your content as a content creator. For the last, I don't know, month or so, we've been talking about finding your life's purpose, as in like the purpose that you have for existing on Earth. And it's a universal thing. If you watch those videos, if you want to discover like your purpose, just you, whether or not you're a content creator or otherwise, it's very applicable. I think this is similar, but it's going to be far more focused on content creators, because I believe that if you know that you have a purpose in this world and you're actively pursuing it or working within it, and you find that purpose is content creation, or at least partly about content creation, then you can, it will, thinking through the way we're going to be talking today is going to be how you can frame your content. That's what we're talking about. So like I said, interrupt anytime and you can, and we'll go through it. So again, another step toward creating meaningful content is to align each piece with God's purposes. The purpose of your content is not something you invent, but rather uncover. It is God-given and should reflect his priorities. The following are boundaries to set so that your content aligns with God's idea and not merely your own. Okay, that's where we're going. So if you've discovered your purpose, right, then it makes sense, and part of your purpose is content creation, then that means your content has a purpose too, right? It's not just, God called me to be a content creator. I'm going to go jump on and start streaming. I'm going to start podcasting. I'm going to start blogging or whatever. And it doesn't matter what I say or do because I'm in the right place. This is what God wants. It's more along the lines of, I believe that God has me a content creator. God's put me in this area, given me this interest, this gift, this talent, this, audience. And he has given me a reason to have that, a purpose behind having that, the audience, that I want to bring them somewhere. If you read the book, the content creator book, impact on whatever, the title of the book, you know what I mean? If you read that, one of the things that I talk about a lot is making sure that you understand where you're bringing people. And this is part of that. This is kind of going, where am I bringing people? Where am I going to be taking these people that listen to me or read my stuff or look at my pictures or follow along in the game with me or experience the variety stream with me? Where am I bringing them? This is part of understanding that. And I believe that as a Christian, one of the things you should be doing is you should be taking your content and aligning it with God's priorities. Why? Because you believe that God's priorities are better priorities than yours, because as you become a Christian, your priorities and God's priorities align, and so therefore you will get more joy, you'll get more contentment, you'll get more purpose, you'll get more effectiveness from doing things his way, right? We believe that. Well, what does that look like if you're a variety streamer? What does that look like if you play Valorant? What does that look like if you are a podcast about anime? What does that look like if you aren't like a Christian content creator dumping out like evangelistic stuff or trying to answer questions about faith? What if your whole mission is to do Minecraft, build Minecraft, have a Minecraft tutorials? Like, what does that look like as a Christian content creator if your content isn't explicitly Christian? As I was writing this, it was very Christian oriented, as in like the notes that I was working off of were very, like if you're going to be a Christian leader, a Christian person talking to Christians about Christian stuff, you should. And I'm like, that doesn't apply to the people that we're serving really with Taco. Most of them don't want to be evangelists. They don't want to be Bible teachers. They don't want to create Christian communities and do pastoral counseling, right? They're not leaders of Christian communities to try to move them forward. They're just people who love other people and have a specific, unique group that they want to serve, that they want to love, that they want to gather together, protect. And I want to make sure that those people understand that they can serve on purpose too. Okay, so your content, if you're going to have purposeful content, it ought to, like purposeful Christian content, ought to, as in this is what you should be thinking as you're creating your content, regardless of what it is, whether it be Minecraft tutorials or an anime blog or some kind of podcast about current events, whatever it is, your content should, if it's going to be on purpose with who God created you to be, number one, begin with God's priorities, right? So essentially that means that when you start any piece of content, no matter what it is, whether it be I'm going to be planning out my next stream, or I haven't started doing content yet. I'm thinking about what I'm going to be creating, or I'm going to be pivoting towards doing something else, or I've been doing this for the last 5 years. Why am I doing this? The idea is to start with kind of saying, okay, why am I here in the first place, right? What is the point of being in this place, in this arena, in this audience, on this platform? Well, the point is that we believe that God has given every human being a purpose. And there's two big purposes that we all have: the Great Commandment and the Great Commission, right? So the Great Commandment, right? The golden rule: love God and love others. Love yourself, love God, and love others as you'd love yourself. That's the golden rule. That's number one. So when you look at your content, you ask the question right up front: does this reflect the priorities of the Great Commandment? And the second is the Great Commission, spreading of the gospel, as in spreading of God's love, spreading of his message. Does this do that? Does this push that forward? If everybody who is a Christian is meant to be a servant of all and is meant to share Jesus' love with people, does this do that? Now, I can hear kind of a pushback already going, yeah, but I don't want to be evangelistic. I don't want to be someone who is constantly talking about Jesus. That's not what my audience is. They're not religious. They're not people, or they were hurt by the church. And if I start doing that, they're not going to understand. That's not what I want to do. Well, stay with me, because that's not what I'm talking about. I'm not saying you need to orient everything around evangelism. Stick with me, because I think you'll understand closer to the end what I mean when it comes to loving God and others, serving, and spreading the gospel, but doing it in a way that reflects your priorities and your gifts, your talents, your content. So consider. Ask the question when you're creating content: what are God's priorities for this content? How does it help others love God or spread the message of Jesus Christ? Whether it's a video, article, piece of art, or stream, ensure it advances God's kingdom. So when you sit there and you are like, what am I going to create? Asking the question right up front, does this reflect God's priorities, is really critical, right? Does this help others love God? Does this show people Christ? So show people Jesus, right? Now, if the answer is just flat out no, then you should rethink what you're doing as a Christian content creator. And I'll go back to that sort of that Minecraft variety streamer who isn't Christian, isn't obvious, or is Christian, but isn't trying to be obviously evangelistic, isn't talking about God all the time, just wants to build a safe community for people who are having a hard time and they don't want to be super ultra religious. But so how can they do that? Is that denying God? I don't think it is. I think what it is, when you look at this, you ask the question, okay, so am I showing love, right? The love that God has given me first, the forgiveness God has given me first, the joy God has given me first. Am I giving that to others, right? Is it flowing through me to others? You can do that in Minecraft through a Minecraft tutorial, have it based in the place of love, in service, in wanting to be able to help people and coming from a place of your faith. And the second, when it comes to the message of Christ, it doesn't have to be the 4 points of salvation or trying to explain people the Romans road or any of that kind of stuff. It can simply be, does this reflect the priorities of Jesus? And if they start scratching on why do they sound different? Why are they like this? Why is this community different? Are they going to scratch and all of a sudden see the image of Christ behind it, right? I think that is more than enough. So active example. So what I wanted to do I wanted to create an active example and a passive example for each of these. So I'm just going to grab a random kind of creator and do an active example. And by active, I mean, you're just like, yes, I'm going to do this. Blap. It's going to be so obvious that my stream is about, on this one, for example, it's about evangelism and it's about, spreading God's love. It's just like nobody questions when they come into my stream or my content or listen to my podcast. That's what I'm about. I'm so obviously Christian. But I also wanted to do a passive example, which is one where you're not obvious about it. It's not upfront. It's not something that you are when people come in, they don't immediately go, oh, this is such a Christian dude with such Christian things happening. It's like you get the vibe, you definitely show your faith, but it's not obvious. So I'm going to do both. I think that might be helpful. So here's the first application. It's the PvP streamer. When I first thought about what's the most difficult person to be able to do this, right? Like if you're doing tutorials or you're doing a podcast, you're writing a blog, you're doing any of that kind of stuff, I think it's a lot easier to be obviously loving or obviously Christian or obvious, like behind the scenes kind of thing. But when it comes to actually, when you're a PvP streamer, like when you're playing Valorant, you're playing, Destiny, you're playing Call of Duty, you're playing that kind of stuff, it might be a little harder to try to think, well, how can I inject love into, murdering my friends? How can I make sure that I show the priorities, the love of Jesus and point to him if I'm, in the saltiest environment full of cussing? That doesn't seem to work. It doesn't seem to connect. Let me show you some consideration. So an active example. So beginning each stream with a short devotional or prayer, focusing on themes like teamwork, patience, and grace. Discuss a Bible verse that relates to the day's challenges or the victories in game. Use this time to actively invite viewers to reflect on how they can apply these principles in their own lives, both in and out of the game, right? So active example. I'm a Christian, so therefore we're going to be jumping into, game, and it's going to be, I'm not going to be talking much. I'm going to be fighting. I'm not going to be talking much. We're going to be competing or speed running or whatever it is. But before we do that, let's have a little talk about, something going on in my life and something I read in a Devo, something I think is going to connect to the people that I'm trying to serve, right? We know that if we're playing a team game, teamwork's important. If we're playing a game that is really kind of high level intellect stuff, whether World of Warcraft or whatever, you're like, well, it's going to take patience. If you're in a super salty, really, really rough environment and you want to play that game and serve those people, you're going to have to be abounding in grace and in patience, right? So it's like, I'm going to be so obvious about that. This is my mission. This is what I'm doing. This is where I'm going. Come with me and let's see how I can do it in this environment. Right? That's an obvious way to do it. Just kind of injecting at the beginning or at the end, going, well, today, and so we have learned applies to our life today. Kind of do that. And then it ends up being obvious. Well, you don't have to be obvious. There's a passive example. PvP streamer application example. Foster a stream culture that emphasizes positive interactions, respect, and encouragement. Set clear guidelines that promote kindness and discourage toxic behavior, subtly reinforcing Christian values without overtly discussing faith. Your demeanor, patience, and how you handle difficult situations will naturally reflect Christ-like behavior. Right? So as you're on stream, or when you step into the lobby, step onto your stream, step into the YouTube, step into whatever you're doing, it is, you have in mind, I am going to purposefully create positive interactions, be more respectful, be more encouraging. I'm not going to fall into all the insults and the banter and all the rest of that stuff that is mean, but I'm still going to be part of it, right? I'm still going to be funny. I'm still going to be making people, like kind of joshing with my team, or with the people that are around, but I'm not going to be toxic. And when people come into my team, they know that it's going to be something that where we have a certain standard, we have a certain group, we have a certain whatever, and the way we conduct ourselves is different. Whether you create a Christian team or you allow people onto your team that aren't believers, this is the way we do things here. And it's not about, here's 12 verses that mean it. You just say, listen, we're not going to be cussy. We're not going to be salty. We're going to be patient, and we're going to have people on our team that maybe don't know what they're doing. So we're going to help them. Right? So we're going to help them. We're not going to get angry. That's just how you do it. And so you passively, and this is a big part of it, right? This isn't active. This is a passive way for you to demonstrate the Great Commission, the Great Commandment, in a seemingly impossible stream. Ukulele says, yes, you can bring Christ into stream in ways that are very organic, like I saw this news article, or I went to this event, or when someone shows up in chat or who has something going on in their life, say, hey, let's take a second to pray for you. Yeah, exactly. And that's it. It can be very natural. The pray for you thing can be very natural, right? It can just become part of your stream. You're sitting there, you're playing, you're doing a thing, you're whatever, and someone comes in and is like, hey, I'm having a rough day. And like in between streams or in the lobby, or while you're waiting in between, or you got the 1 minute countdown in Fortnite. You just kind of like, you know what, I'm just take just a second to pray for so-and-so, just to ask God to bless them. God, bless that person. They're going through some stuff right now. And I just pray that you show them some love and let them know that you're with them. And then you jump straight into Fortnite. Doesn't have to be a big thing. Doesn't have to be a giant like sermon. Just becomes part of your flow. And people just recognize not only do you love them, but you actively are engaging, God in the process without preaching, without, like Bible thumping. Number 2, content that is purposeful will reflect your unique identity, right? Your content should be a reflection of your unique gifts, your passions, your spiritual insights, the things that God is working in your heart. We talked about that last week. This is, if you go watch the previous talk, we talked about how do you discover who you are in God, what he created you to be, what are the ways that you can kind of see what is my purpose. Your purpose, whatever you came up with there, whether it be your natural talents, your spiritual gifts, your environment, the damage that you have inside of you, all that stuff that makes you should be reflected in your content. If it's purposeful, if it's godly, if you believe God called you to it, then it should look like you and God at the same time. I say this because a lot of the advice that's out there, when you go looking for how to stream, how to make effective YouTube videos, how to do the algorithm, how to create a good podcast, it's always the same. It's always go find something that's popular and copy them. Go piggyback on popular people and do what they do. Go in and go into their comment section and pull ideas out of their audience, right? And what ends up happening is the Christian who wants to serve, the Christian who wants to grow, who feels called to content creation, ends up morphing themselves into a non-believer's mold, because what they're trying to do is to become successful in what they're doing, because they want to apply their lives to it because they believe it's important to God, but they're doing it in such a way that it's very oriented only to non-believers, or it's very piggybacking on other people, or it's trying to mimic others. And you don't have to do that. So your content will reflect what you look like. Reflect what you look like. It's not going to be yes, of course you can learn from other people. That's not what I'm saying, but it's going to certainly be something that is uniquely you. So consider, how does this specific piece of content express the unique qualities that God has instilled in you, right? Whether it's a tutorial, a story, gameplay, ensure it showcases the gifts and passions God placed in your heart, making it authentic and purposeful. So a big part of that is going to be asking who your audience is. Who do you have a heart for? What message are you trying to give? Who did God create you to be? Where did you come from? What are your limitations? What are your what are your physical, emotional, spiritual, mental limitations? What are you excited about? What gets you going in the morning? What makes you want to join into that content? Is it because you want to build a community because of loneliness? Or is it because you want to share knowledge because of expertise? Is it because you want to, create something that is special for a unique group of people? Like, say, for example, people with PTSD, or people with learning disabilities, or people with, migraines. I'm going to create something they can watch, or something they can be part of, that is going to uniquely connect to them because it uniquely connects to me. Right? I think that's important. It reflects my priorities. Likely you're not going to see it anywhere else, or when you see it, you're going to see a secular version that you're like, yeah, that doesn't really do it the way I want to do it. And so it's okay to create it in the way that will reflect you. Believe me, I've said this a dozen times. There are like 1 million people out there doing the same thing that you're trying to do. There are 1 million anime podcasts, and there's 1 million blogs, and there's 1 million like YouTubers, and there's 1 million streamers, right? But there's only one you. And so therefore, when people come and they watch your stuff, or they listen to your stuff, they're coming for you. And so the less you look like you, the more you pretend, the less people are going to be able to, who want to be there. They're going to go find somebody who's better at the game, better at the content, more winsome, more something, better audio. They're going to go there. But if you are you, they'll connect to you, and they'll work around all that other stuff and grow with you because they like you. So make sure you show who you are. and who God created you to be. Ukulele says that's why our different life stories are so special. They make us each uniquely suited to share God differently. Exactly. Multifaceted. I like the term multifaceted because it's a really good expressive term. It is essentially, you think of a diamond, right? Or you think of the old illustration of an elephant, right? Well, what is a bunch of blind people are near an elephant? What's an elephant like? And one's got a hold of the ear, and it's like, oh, it's kind of like leather. The other one's touching the leg, and it's like, oh, it's kind of like a tree. And the other one's, got the tail. Oh, it's kind of like a brush, And they're all kind of right. But when they bring them all together, you get the picture of the elephant. In the same way, God uniquely gives us special interactions with him and others, and when we share that, we're going to show something about God that other people won't know or won't see, won't have experienced. It's really special. So, active example, let's say you do a podcast about anime. An active example would be incorporating your Christian worldview into the discussions by drawing parallels between the themes in anime and biblical stories and principles. This is what Donnie Dreams is doing right now. He's literally going, I'm going to watch an anime and I'm going to make it about something in the Bible, right? This is a verse that reminds me of that. This is a person in the Bible, right? Discussing themes like redemption, sacrifice, particular anime. You go right back to Jesus. You go right back to a verse. You go right back to somebody in the Bible. That's exactly what Donnie's doing. But there's a passive way to do it too, right? So in the same anime, same kind of podcast, talking about the same kind of stuff, instead of being like, well, that reminds me of David and this verse, or that reminds me of Jesus and this parable, instead you allow your personal stories, your reflections, your unique insights to flow into your discussions. Share how certain anime themes resonate with your faith journey or your personal experiences, and don't be afraid to be vulnerable or creative in how you express these connections. Right? So it's very similar, except for you're not like stamping it with a Bible verse or trying to use Bible stuff. It's going to be similar. Like, for example, say you're talking about, I don't know, Naruto and Sasuke, how they, how their friendship works. And it's very weird how Naruto is super ultra committed to Sasuke, but Sasuke only ever rejects him and is mean all the time, right? And yet Naruto feels this compulsion. Why? Well, that connects to me because I understand what it's like to be drawn towards people who have been through hard stuff. That's why Naruto's there. He grew up in a really hard way. He didn't have very many friends. He didn't like being alone. And when he finally got onto a team, he saw this person who is kind of like him, has powers, has uniqueness, but lost his whole family. And therefore now, he's going to make sure that kid is good. Make sure that kid is happy. Make sure that kid has friends, because he does not want him to be like him when he grew up. And you see that all the way through Naruto. He keeps bumping into people nonstop that are like rejects and social outcasts, and his heart goes out to them and he helps, right? None of that's, I didn't have to pick a Bible verse. You can if you want to, but like, I didn't have to pick a Bible verse. I can just share my heart and share how the least of these, the people who the widows, the orphans, the people who are socially not popular, or people who are sick, or people who are ostracized, how you're either one of them, or you felt like one of them, or you feel drawn to one of them. That's plenty. Anime outreach. Exactly, Conroy. By being open about how God has shaped your worldview, you subtly invite listeners to consider their own convictions and the deeper meaning behind the media they consume. This approach encourages a reflective, thoughtful atmosphere without needing to be overtly religious, right? So the idea is you're expanding their minds about, wow, I never thought about the show that way. I never thought about myself as a social outcast who is attracted to social outcasts. Or I never thought about why I'm so attached to these people who everybody else doesn't like very much. I guess that makes sense. And you kind of explore that, which will lead people naturally to bigger, deeper conversations. I think anytime you can lead someone into a philosophical, theological, personal, applicable, big topic thinking, I think it's going to inevitably lead them closer to God, because that's where the truth is. That's where those topics go. And remember, you can interrupt with a question anytime you want. I'm going to just keep plowing through. Content that is going to be purposeful is going to also include others. Okay? Just the way that God operates in this world is always is good is never alone, right? I'm just saying that's what I'm saying, Blanco. If you're part of this stream, you're a social outcast because I like you. Deal with it. I'm the only one. But yeah, so include others. You will not, God will not ask you to do anything alone. He's not going to be saying, okay, listen, I have a special mission for you, and I have a group of people for you to serve, and I have a message for you to give. Go and do it by yourself. Trust no one. Listen to no one. Learn from no one. Partner with no one. It's just you and me, kid. He'll never do that. If you look through the whole Bible, you will always see God uniting people, bringing them together. He's he wants them to either submit to some mentor or connect to a brother or to be put together with their family or the family of believers or the kingdom of God or the body of Christ. It's always uniting. Your purpose, your content will include others. That's the way it'll work. So God's purpose for your content will involve others. You should serve, uplift, and build community rather than existing in isolation. That's one of the biggest things. Oh, me too, Dragon. That's one of the biggest things that will separate a Christian content creator from a non-Christian, is that the non-Christian content creator is, as they grow, will become more isolated. Right? They will, whereas before they were like really connecting to people that were like them and kind of being like really like their own particular audience. But as they grow more popular, they start to isolate themselves from that audience, isolate themselves from the people that they were serving, isolate themselves from being able to communicate with others. I think if streamers, get bigger and bigger, eventually they don't talk to anybody because they can't. All they do is they kind of stay in their own little upper echelon with their own little people, talking to only them. And they actually isolate. They get closer and more isolated. A Christian content creator, and you can see this in with all kinds of different content, whether it be even sermons or for that matter nonprofits, it expands out. Right, the more I serve and the more people that the more broad my impact gets, the more people I want to include, the more people I want to serve, the more people I want to bring into the fold, the more people I want to communicate with, the more people I want to give leadership positions to and encourage and make sure that they are also able to communicate well and to feel what I'm feeling in my area of success. We will invite more people in. I think that's a huge part of what makes Christian content creators different, right? We engage others. We make sure that we are doing it in such a way that it serves people. The most non-Christian way, I'm not saying all non-Christians do this, but the most non-Christian thing is to see the audience as people that serve you. They're there to feed you subs and they're to watch your stuff and feed and follow your podcast and give you subscriptions and pay your bills and make you feel good and give you encouragement and spread your name. That's what they're for. Your audience exists for you. Christians are exactly the opposite. We exist for the sake of our audience, right? The only reason they when we see them and they come to us, we think, I'm here to serve them. I'm here to unite them. I'm here to educate them. I'm here to inspire them. I'm here to bring them closer to God. I'm here to let them know something they don't have before. I'm here to bring them together in somewhere safe. I exist for them. That is the major difference between Christian and non-Christian. It is an outward focus. So when you're making your content, it will connect to people. So ask yourself, how does this content serve someone? How does this content serve someone? And if you're looking at and evaluating other people's content, say someone says, can you go watch my stream? Can you go watch my video? Can you listen to my podcast? Can you listen to my song? Can you read my blog? This is a great question for you to ask to evaluate that content. Does it serve anyone? Or is that person just trying to be clever, trying to be funny, trying to be interesting, trying to be excellent at the game or the content or whatever? Or is it actually seeking to serve someone and has a purpose? And if it doesn't, right, 4 straight hours of doing whatever, and at no point does anybody ever get encouraged or feel more loved or get connected to someone else or feel more safe or know Jesus better or something, then it was failed Christian content. It really was. It could involve engaging your audience in meaningful conversations, offering support, encouraging community among viewers. Content that includes others invites collaboration, discussion, and mutual growth, right? It's also, I would include in that vulnerability. One thing, I tried to include that, but it's vulnerability is a big part of it too, is just being willing to share your issues, because that way people can know that you are a safe person, because they have issues too. If you look perfect and you sound perfect and you're always trying to sound great and you never show any weakness, it actually is going to work against you as a Christian content creator. Active example. So digital artist, how can a digital artist apply this? Well, let's say they host live art sessions where you collaborate with your community, actively involve your viewers in the creative process, ask for their input and ideas, and using the session as a way to discuss faith and art. Like, for example, when you are going to put something together, you do a poll. What do you want me to do? Or what are you guys drawing? Let's see. I think of, like, for example, Jaden Animations or any of those other like cartoon artists, like the animators, who have that stream of like fan art that goes by during the credits, right? That idea, what they're doing there is they're showing their community that they value them too, to the point where they will put them into their content. So in the same way as Christians, we do the same thing. Like, how do we collaborate with people? How do we connect to them? How do we encourage them? How do we show them, demonstrate that we love them through our content, showing them encouragement? What does it look like? So for you, it could simply be that whenever you do something, or you play the game, or you start the podcast, or you whatever, it's always open to communication. There's always a feedback loop. There's always something, and you always connect to that feedback loop, because then you, like example, you answer the questions they ask, or you connect to the comments that they make, or you go through the comments of the video and you pick 2 or 3 and you talk about them, or you're always talking through to the content. Maybe you don't even talk about the comments in your content, but you are always engaged with that community within your comments section. Like, it's connective. Here's a passive example for a digital artist, and I'm just picking creators at random, right? Create a supportive online community where artists can share their work, receive constructive feedback, and encourage one another. By fostering a culture of positivity, generosity, and support, you subtly promote Christian values of love, kindness, and encouragement, even without overt discussion. So, because in your mission to unite people and to love others and bring them closer to God, right? That first thing we talked about. Instead of having a Christian collective of creators, you just simply say, come over here. No matter what kind of artist you are, we're here to encourage you, to educate you, to help you, to give you feedback, to show love. And maybe you're not there all the time. Like, of course, some of it's going to revolve around you, because that's how people connect. But the idea is to create a community where they are loving and helping each other, right? You make sure it's safe, you make sure it's moderated and all the rest of that stuff, but you're not actively, consistently trying to pull people out. It's not driven by you and your ideas. The idea is to make a mutually connected community. Hopefully that makes sense. Number 4, content that has purpose will be bigger than itself. Okay. The content you create should aim to accomplish something beyond mere entertainment or information. You should be looking for a God-sized impact. So what does that mean? Essentially, it means when you're making your content, ask yourself if it challenges your audience to think or act on God's call in a bigger way. Is it content that will resonate after it's consumed, inspiring action, change, or deeper faith, right? So in other words, does it exist and then disappear forever? Or when people come back to it, they come back around to it, or when they take a look at it, they go, I'm getting something out of this. I can share this with a friend. I can send this to somebody, and it's sort of evergreen, right? Whatever moment that's in there, whatever lesson was learned, whatever community was built, it has a perpetuation to it. It keeps you away from like living in meme culture, chasing trends. Not that you can't do that, not that you can't, kind of play the game when it comes to TikTok or whatever, or, popular games. That's not what I'm saying, not to do that. But the idea is that the undergirding mission is to create something that is bigger than just the game, bigger than just the meme, bigger than just the trend, bigger than just the song, bigger than just the Discord, right? It's something that is designed to perpetuate and be bigger. That might be intimidating, but you'll be surprised how the smallest things can do this. For example, you tell a little story, and you don't think it's that big of a deal, but you tell a little story during your podcast or during your whatever, you write it out in your blog or in your art, like you do it like a personal comic that kind of illustrates part of your life. It was a one-off thing or something, but for you put that out there, and it kind of catches on, and people, it hits their heart, and it continues to hit their heart for a long, long, long time. If you've had a blog or you've had a podcast or you've had anything like I have for a long time, there will be certain posts that are just nonstop getting hits. Years after you've made them, still hitting, because it has a life bigger than merely the content that was created. It's hard to know which ones those are, but it's very true. It's very true that if you connect to that, it's going to be bigger than itself. It'll continue to connect long after you've moved on. Ukulele says, do you think that traditional entertainment model, where the entertainer, TV evangelist, band speaker, was inaccessible, makes it harder for us to picture our role as creators being personal and accessible? I think so, because the way that we look at content creation is through the lens of who we can see, right? So what does a YouTuber look like in your mind? Like, what does a YouTuber look like? Are they community focused? Are they personal? Are they vulnerable? Usually they're funny, or they have really good video, or they have really good audio, or they're very connected to people, or they have lots of money, or they have, they're doing something unique with a group of people that you could never be part of. Like, in your mind, what does a YouTuber look like? And often it's not a suffering servant who is seeking to be vulnerable with people so he can create, or he or she can create content that exists beyond that moment. You think of someone who is just grabbing trends, trying to get big and please the algorithm. So in your mind, when you're like, I want to be a YouTuber, that's what you're like. That's what what your mind's going to be. In the same other, like, for example, what does a podcaster look like? Well, they always have, I don't know, this ad, or they always have this sound, for you. So for us, yeah, I think in a very real way, one of the problems that Christian content creators have, and I cover this in the book too, is that we don't have heroes. We don't have many Christian content creator heroes who we can look at and be like, read their biography and watch their life movie, or be able to go and connect to them over a long period of time and see their history, because we're just too new, right? Yeah, there have been people that have been doing it for 10 years. But when it comes to who's the OG, let's say you want to be an evangelist, who's your number one? Well, I'm going to go learn about D.L. Moody, or I'm going to learn about Billy Graham. I'm going to go learn about, Hudson Taylor. I'm going to go learn, Paul. And so that's what I'm going to do. And so, okay, so what if you want to be a famous anything? Preacher, youth pastor, actor, singer. There's lots that you can go connect to. But when it comes to Christian content creator, who's your big image? This is kind of who I want to be like. That's harder to do because there aren't very many. So yeah, I do think it makes it more difficult. The content you create should aim to accomplish something beyond mere entertainment or information. It should have a God-sized impact. That's what we're talking about. So evaluate whether this content challenges you or your audience to think bigger or act on God's call, right? That's what we were talking about. Is it going to have legs? So, for example, a variety streamer. There's a lot of you guys are variety streamers. What does that look like to have eternal impact, or to have some kind of big, massive, long-term growth, for when it's you do it every day, you do it 5 times a week, you're just doing silly stuff online? How can that possibly have eternal impact? Well, consider, it's an active example, literally saying, this is the part that's going to live forever in my stream. Yes, maybe the gameplay for whatever isn't, but this part is. So you dedicate a portion of your stream to raising awareness about a cause that aligns with Christian values, aligns with your audience, aligns with your priorities, whether it be charity or some other thing. And you encourage your viewers to get involved. You donate, you support that cause, making your content more about that than about entertainment. So yes, you're playing Fortnite. Yes, you're looking at memes. Yes, you're doing silly stuff. But along with that is this undercurrent of everybody who comes in here understands that we're here to help people who have cancer. We're here to help people who are going through whatever mental health, people who have autism, people who need adoption, people who are, anti-abortion, whatever it is. My content will grow, have eternal value, because even when I'm done, even if I, stop creating content, the money we raised, the awareness that we created, the videos that we made about it, the things that we talked about is going to live on in the hearts of the people that experienced it, and also in the, to be able to help people because, you funded something or you helped something. It's bigger. So that's an active example, right? That is purposefully putting something together that will do that kind of thing. What would a passive example be? Well, you use your platform to highlight stories of hope, resilience, and transformation. Whether you're discussing current events, personal stories, or community achievements, focus on content that inspires and uplifts, pointing to a greater purpose without necessarily making it explicitly religious, right? So, in other words, the eternal impact, like the bigger impact that you're having, is people remember the story you told, people remember the situation you went through, that you were vulnerable about, and that you kind of walked with, told people about, brought people with while you were creating your content, like over a period of a month, right? I lost my job and now I'm going through some stuff and it's really hard and I don't know what to do and I'm trying to apply and it's not working. And so I'm telling people kind of about that. And then by the end, we went through and I have another job. Well, that section of your variety stream, even though it wasn't what your main content was, even though it wasn't like the focus, it is the thing. After a few months, people still come back and be like, man, you went through this job thing. I'm going through something similar. I remember you went through it with grace, and that sometimes you were scared and sometimes you were worried and you asked for help. And so I'm doing the same thing. I want to do that too. And it ends up being evergreen, or it has a bigger impact because that section was pushed into someone's life and they live different. It doesn't have to be active, hey, let's go cure cancer. It can be because of your vulnerabilities, because of your perception of current events, because of your, here comes a tornado, here comes an election, here comes something. This is what's kind of going through my head right now. You get into people's minds and it uplifts them, it connects them and inspires them. And it doesn't have to be a bunch of, God talk. It can connect them in a very passive way to eternal values. Yeah, of course, you talk about God, you talk about your priorities, you talk about your life as a Christian, for sure. That's totally valid. But at the same time, it's not designed to be this specific thing, right? That's what I'm talking about. All right, next one. Contain life-changing convictions. Number 5. Description: your content should be infused with convictions that are aligned with God's truth and are worth sharing. Okay, so no matter what you're doing, and this kind of echoing a lot of what we talked about before, but the idea is that the core message of your content, the center, the gravimetric pull that all your content is around, has biblical truth. It reflects God's love, reflects God's mission, reflects God's character. It challenges people, encourages people, inspires people to look into what it means to be human, to understand that there's eternity in the mix, to look at good versus evil, all those really kind of big things. It centers. Yeah, it could be fun, could be silly, could be anime, could be serious, could be, blogging about politics or whatever. But the core of it, and that always this universal thing that you can see throughout all your content, all your videos, all your podcasts, all your everything, is that core. It's based on biblical truth. Does it challenge, encourage, or inspire others to live out their faith more fully? Your content should convey messages that matter, driven by strong, life-changing convictions. That's going to come from, and to speak about the passive one, that's going to come about where you are with God. Your level of faith, your level of trust, your level of obedience, your willingness to do your devos, say your prayers, go to church, sacrifice, forgive people, submit to others, serve people, all that offline stuff that ends up happening as a Christian, just being a Christian, is going to be the thing that shines through in your content. So if you're if you're faking it offline, if you're pretending to be a Christian, if you are, you're steeped in sin, or you're not part of a faith community, and you don't worship and you don't do your devos, you don't read the Bible, and then you show up on stream or show up in your podcast and you want it to be God oriented, all your yuck's going to come through. Your core message isn't going to point to Jesus, even no matter how much you try to hypocrite your way and Jesus talk your way into it. It's going to reflect who you are offline. In the same exact way, the person you are offline, the character you have offline, regardless of how purposeful or how obvious active you are in your evangelism and God talk, it's going to come through. Right? You're going to be more patient, more kind, more loving, more hopeful, more peaceful, more forgiving. It's just going to happen because that's who you are. That's who God's created you to be. So are you doing it offline? Whatever that's going to be is going to be the core of what your content is. And you might be like, nah, I can fake it. I can fake it. I can look at stuff I'm not supposed to look at, and I can skip Bible reading, and I can not talk to anybody and never submit to an elder, and I can do all that stuff, and I can go make Christian content. I would say that you are lying to yourself, because your content isn't honoring God, because your life isn't honoring God, and God's not going to bless that content. It's just not going to happen. No matter how much you work hard to sound Christian or whatever, it's just not going to work, because you're a hypocrite. You're a Pharisee. We're talking about how your content should contain life-changing convictions. It's going to come from you and who you are. So as an active example, if you're a gaming YouTuber, right? So you're a YouTuber who just shows games, right? You're not like a variety streamer, but you're like, here, this is what I do. Here's a gameplay. If you're you want to be active, create a video, essay, or gameplay commentary that actively explores moral and ethical decisions within games, relating them to Christian values. For example, discuss how the choices players make in a game reflect deeper truths about justice, forgiveness, sacrifice. Use these moments to engage your audience in thoughtful discussions about how these game scenarios can mirror real-life convictions, and encourage viewers to consider their own beliefs. So basically, it's like, this hit me in a certain way. This reflects my biblical values. This is why I made that choice. This is why I believe justice. This is why this part of the game was important to me. Actively actually saying it out loud, so that it ends up being, come from your heart. And the passive one for the exact same thing would be, let your convictions naturally influence the way you present your content. For example, choose to highlight games that encourage positive messages or meaningful storytelling. As you discuss game narratives or character development, share personal reflections on how these aspects of the game resonate with your faith journey or ethical beliefs. Without being overtly religious, you can subtly guide your audience to think more deeply about the content they engage with, demonstrating how your convictions shape your approach to gaming and content creation, right? That's the idea, is that while you're doing this, right, while you're have these life-changing convictions infused with the truth, infused with biblical truth, you either do it actively, as in, this is where the biblical truth looks in the middle of this choice that I just made in Baldur's Gate 3, or it's, as you're talking about it, you're like, man, you know what? If I was in this situation, I really think that I would do this, and this is why I do that. And I remember when I was growing up, and, this situation came up or whatever, and it's not necessarily obvious. You don't quote Bible verses, but all the way through, you have this core, this life-changing convictions at the center of everything you do. Or, and you could do it the opposite. I've done that in one stream, and it freaked people out. I'm going to make the exact opposite choices to what I would normally choose, like the opposite of what I think is a good idea. So it's, what would a life look like in utter rebellion? Let's talk about that. Now, an active gaming streamer would go, this reminds me of the parable of the lost son, or parable of the merciful father, and therefore I'm going to try to do that. What it would be like to completely screw up your life? Well, let's watch and see what happens in the game. Whereas the other side would be like, you know what? I'm going to pick the opposite stuff because it's important to see the other side of this, and let's see what happens to our character. I'm not going to reference the lost son. I'm not going to reference merciful father. I'm just going to go through and talk about it and be like, this really rankles me. This gets I don't want to do this. This is the wrong way to do it, and here's why. You could do that passively or actively. Does that make sense? Hopefully it does. And number 6, this is the last one. Have eternal value. Your content should have an impact that reaches beyond this life and touches eternity. It should contribute to God's eternal purposes and not be limited to merely making a difference in the present moment. Remember, that doesn't mean that you are always evangelistic. It doesn't mean that you're always bringing people to the faith. It doesn't mean that you're telling everybody to go to church. That's not what that means. What it means is sort of similar to what we were talking about before, is that your content is evergreen. It continues to have an effect. And in your mind, it's not just I'm helping people, but it's I believe that that this content that goes out, when I do this, as it impacts people's lives, that impact is going to carry on into eternity and beyond. That hope that I'm giving them is going to help them in eternity. The peace that I'm sharing with them, the safety I'm giving them, the content that I'm doing that inspires them or educates them or brings them into a community, the community I'm building, the art that I'm producing that is inspiring and making them see lovely things, those are all connecting them to God, and they will be remembering that farther than merely just going, wow, that's kind of cool, right? You look at a meme, it goes by, and you can see this in a million different shorts. I'm guilty of this too, right? You sit there and you watch TikTok, or you sit there and watch YouTube shorts, flick, 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 flick. You do it for 2 hours straight, and then you turn it off and ask the question, what do I remember? What of any of that connected to me? And often the answer is nothing. It glazed by. It had no purpose, no value, no nothing. Maybe it was funny for a second, silly for a second, interesting for a second, whatever. But now it's gone, right? And when you create content as a Christian content creator, thinking, I want to do something that isn't going to zip by and disappear. Not that it has to be preachy, not that it has to be, anything hyper biblical or whatever, but just when people watch it, I want them to go, you know what, that did something. That hit me in a certain way. And I'm going to think about that for a little while. Before creating or publishing, consider whether your work will have a lasting impact beyond this life. Aim to create content that not only entertains or informs, but also encourages viewers to think about their spiritual journey, relationships, ultimate purpose in life. Whether through the themes you explore, the stories you tell, the values you promote, ensure your content resonates with eternal significance and leads others towards a deeper understanding of what truly matters. As a preacher, I learned to ask the question, and I was taught this in seminary, is that every sermon I give has to have a so what, right? If I speak for 45 minutes and I talk about all these Bible verses and all these, events, and to tell you what every single word means in the Greek, and get to the end of it, I hear from the audience, so what? Right? Which in my mind means, how's that going to apply to my life today? How is that supposed to give me hope today? I'm going through some stuff. How's that supposed to connect me to God? How does that help me to understand the world from a Christian worldview? You just talk for 45 minutes. And if I walk out this door and none of it hit my heart, none of it changes my life, none of it changes my opinions or my feelings, none of it connects me to God or others or inspires me to serve or anything, then what was the point? What a waste of a service, what a waste of a sermon, right? I think in the same way, when you look at your content and you kind of go, all right, well, what of this, after they're done watching it, will they walk away with? Like, so what? So you did 4 hours of playing Minecraft. You did 4 hours of playing Valorant. You did 4 hours of talking about politics. You did 4 hours of whatever. Like, you did a podcast for whatever. At the end of it, you sit down and you say, what are people going to walk away with? What? And it could be simple as, they're going to walk away with the fact that for 4 straight hours they were able to be kept from temptation that would make them go to somewhere bad, or that they were kept safe, or that they were inspired and helped, or that they were educated and they're now better at the game so they can be a more effective part of the community, so that they can be a light where they are, like whatever it is, right? This doesn't have to be super ultra hyper like spiritual, but if you imagine, and as a creator, right, if you create a big event and you do a big thing, huge piece of content you work really hard on, and at the end of it someone goes, hey, that was pretty cool, and that's it, right?
all your feedback is neat. That looked cool. That was kind of interesting. I really like that graphic you did. I really, whatever. And that's it. You should feel like that was a failed piece of content. Whereas if you put together something and maybe it's not great or maybe whatever, but someone's like, man, when you said that, I really thought about that. Or when you put that out there, it really made me want to go draw my own thing, or it made me want to look up what the heck that was, or that philosophical idea that you'd brought up, or when you shared that story, or, whatever it is that, I'm thinking about that still, that really helped. That comment, that's what you're there for. That's the so what. I think all the content you do should have a so what. Let's do a couple of active examples of whatever of this, of whatever we're talking about, having eternal value. So let's say you're a variety gaming person, right? Like you don't do variety content, as in you don't talk a lot. You just play a ton of games. So what would that look like to have eternal value as a variety gaming person? I said, actively discuss how the themes within the games you play relate to eternal truths. We've said that about 1 million times. And because that's really part of it, is when you actively play a game, you actively pull out things that are going to point to Jesus. You talk about big topics, good versus evil, redemption, sacrifice. You pause during those moments and you're like, this makes me think of this Bible verse. This makes me think of this theological statement. This makes me think of this part of salvation. Like, you actively pursue this stuff, and as you do that, it's building that eternal value, because you're like, all I did was play Baldur's Gate, right? But the choices within pointed directly to my faith, to why I do what I do, why I say what I say, good versus evil, salvation, Holy Spirit, spiritual gifts, differences in life, racism, all that stuff. I can see that there, and I make it obvious that that's why I'm doing it. The passive, it's going to sound exactly the same as it has before, but I still think it's worth saying. And that is subtly encourage viewers to think about the lasting impact of their actions and decisions in the game in real life, right? Like, you don't have to be like, and that reminds me of this Bible verse, but you can be like, man, I remember when I had to make that decision, or this is going to be a big thing. Our choices matter. I love games that choices matter. Or if I go and do this, right, I would never cheat because, or I'm going to use this exploit because, like, whatever it is. For example, when discussing strategy or character choices, you could emphasize the importance of thinking ahead, considering the long-term consequences, subtly mirroring the idea of living with that eternal perspective, right? You don't have to say it, but like, man, I know for a fact that in this life, you choose, in this game in life, you choose a guy, you're stuck with it. And that's who you're going to be stuck with for the rest. So I better do this right up front, right? That has value. That'll preach, as they used to say. But like, that has value. You might also focus on games that emphasize teamwork, community, the pursuit of justice. Encourage viewers to apply these principles to their own lives. Through your consistent emphasis on these values, you guide your audience to reflect on what truly matters and how their actions today have lasting eternal significance. So what that reminds me of is the fact that if people are going to watch you all the time, or they consume your content a lot, they're going to start sounding like you, right? They're going to be little foibles that you do, or little goofy words that you use, or phrases that you keep putting out, or themes within your content, or themes that things that have sort of a consistent callback to, and they're going to become part of that. It'll become part of your content creator culture. And over a period of time, as they watch for 6 months, a year, or whatever, or they go and they just consume all of your YouTube channels, they're going to see something and it's going to connect to them. My kids, everybody, we talk in quotes from movies, quotes from memes, quotes from songs, quotes from things that just kind of live on in our head. And that's what we can do for people when it comes to this stuff. Like they're going to sit in front of that same game and they're going to look at that exact same situation. They're going to go, you know what? He was right. Decisions matter. How I start this thing is really going to matter. And so maybe, by God's grace, after you say decisions matter about 1 million times, then all of a sudden later in life, he's going to be looking at a real decision and be like, you know what, this is kind of like the guy I keep watching or the girl I keep watching. Decisions matter. I better make the right one. What I'm trying to say is that it doesn't have to be on the nose, biblical, crazy, like obvious Bible stuff. You can change lives using passive yet purposeful conversations. I think it's got, hopefully that helps. My objective here is to not only let you know that you have a purpose as a creator, as a human being, but that when you create, you should be creating on purpose. I want to talk about this. I want you to, so in the, send me a message, send me a comment, hit me with something in here as a question, and let's talk about it further.